My name is Amanda, and I'm an alcoholic addict. I have been sober since August 2014, which puts me at exactly 6.5 years. I'm 39 years old, and I guess I'm here today to talk about my experience, my strength, and my hope, in the hopes that whoever's watching this, if you hear something that might help, or might give you the courage to reach out, because sobriety truly has saved my life. So I'll talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and I will start at the very beginning because that's the easiest way to do it. I am the oldest of 4 kids, and all 4 of us kids were born within a 5-year period, so we're all very close in age. And I was born into a very loving home with amazing parents who worked really, really hard to give us everything that we could ever need and ever want. And looking back now, I can recognize what an absolute struggle that was for my parents. They often worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time each, and just how they balanced everything, I'll never know. But it was really wonderful. There was no drugs in my home. There was no alcohol really in my home. My parents were not even really social drinkers. The Grand Marnier and the Crown Royal in the liquor cabinet gathered dust. You know, it was brought out on special occasions. So everything was very normal, average. But with that being said, being the oldest of 4 kids to 2 very busy parents, I was oftentimes put in a position of authority, and I had a lot of responsibility. And a lot of the time I was left to care for my younger siblings. I was left to cook meals. I had to clean the house. I had a lot of things to do to help my parents. And, I never really thought anything of it. That's just the way life was. And I think it gave me a really good foundation. My work ethic was always really good. I always had a really good sense of responsibility. I made good choices as a young person. I babysat a lot. I babysat for a lot of people. I always had a kid on my hip, and I always had money in my pocket. I started working when I was 12 years old, and by the time I was 14, I was actually making a paycheck. So for a lot of my peers, a lot of friends, that was really cool. I always had money. I had a bank account. I had a steady income for a 14-year-old. So fast forward a little bit, my story doesn't start with alcohol, it starts with drugs. I was maybe 15 years old, and that was when I got high for the first time. I smoked weed, and I remember the feeling even to this day. I remember the feeling of every burden and every responsibility that I had was just lifted off my shoulders. I felt for the first time in my entire life that I was completely free. I had not a care in the world. And I would say that literally from the first time I smoked weed to the very next day and the day after that, I became a chronic weed smoker. I smoked every day. I woke up in the morning and I got high through the day, I got high in the evening until I went to bed. And I would say probably not even a year from the first time I smoked weed is when I got into the harder drugs, the hallucinogenics. I started going to raves, I started going to parties. I was working still, I was going to school still. And I was just trying to balance everything, and that stopped working. So I did the most logical thing at the time, and I quit school so that I could work, so that I could make money, so that I could buy drugs, so that I could go party. And I worked at a coffee shop across the street from my high school. So I still got to see all my friends every day. In between classes and on spares, I still got to hang out with everybody, but I was making money. And I realized very quickly that that is not the life that I wanted to have. I did not want to be working in a coffee shop for the rest of my life. While all of my friends were moving on, moving forward, you know, doing well. So I quit that job and I went back to school. I was, I guess, in the middle of grade 10, but I chose to go to a different high school and have different friends. Because I figured that it wasn't me that was the problem. If I could just get away from where I was and who I was hanging out with, that I would be okay. Something I later learned was what we call a geographical cure, which there's no such thing. So I started a new school. I got some new friends. Things were going okay for a while. And I fell back into the same pattern. I started using drugs again. I was drinking as well. I started drinking. I made it halfway through grade 11 and I dropped out again. And, you know, wash, rinse, repeat. I did the same thing over and over. I couldn't understand why things weren't going my way. I had dreams. My dream since I was a child was always to be married, to have a house, to be a mom. It was what I was good at. I was very domestic still. And all of these things, they were unattainable with the lifestyle I was living. So I dropped out of that school. I went back to the first school. I started grade 12 and I met a man and we very quickly fell in love. I ended up leaving school 3 credits shy of my high school diploma. I like to say that I don't regret anything in my life because where I am today is because of everything that happened. But not finishing high school is definitely one of the biggest regrets that I have to this day. 3 credits, they weren't even mandatory. I could have taken art and gym and whatever and graduated high school. I never did that. Instead, I got engaged. By the time I was 20, I bought my first house. 21, I got married. And in that year, I was pregnant. And everything seemed to be going amazing. I had, really gotten myself on the straight and narrow. When I was 7.5 months pregnant with my first child, I found out that she had a chromosomal disorder and that she wasn't going to survive. It was a disorder that was incompatible with life, is what the hospital told me. And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. Everybody was. And so I went on to give birth to my daughter, and she lived for 38 minutes. And that was probably the darkest time of my entire life. I had so much support around me, and I had so many people who loved me, and I still just felt completely alone and completely empty. And I felt like I had been robbed, and I was angry. But my husband and I decided that we would try again. And I very quickly got pregnant again. And when I was 3 months pregnant, I had a miscarriage. And I was still grieving the loss of my daughter and then having to deal with the loss of this baby. And I remember being in the doctor's office and I was completely just irrational, and she offered me a prescription for Valium. And I said, no, I don't want that. I don't want any drugs. And I went home that night and there was like this, nagging in the back of my head. It had been offered to me and I should just take it. So I went back the next day to the doctors, and I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell anybody, and I got the prescription. And I continued to take Valium for a while. So again, I wasn't really dealing with my problem. I wasn't learning how to cope with my feelings. I was just masking that with drugs and more alcohol. Then things got a little better. I got pregnant again, and I had a daughter, and she was like the most amazing thing that had ever happened to me. There was so much joy and so much love when she was born. And I remember when she came out and they put her on my chest, and my very first words to her were, "I'm going to take such good care of you." And I meant that. When I said it to her, I meant it. And, I was a good mom. I got pregnant again. I had a son. I had this $1 million family. Everything was great. And then my marriage started to fall apart for reasons that I won't get into. It happens. And that was really tough. We hung on for 4 years trying to make it work, and we couldn't. And in that 4 years, I started smoking weed again. I started drinking a lot. Emotionally, I wasn't able to cope with any of the feelings that I was having, the feelings of failure, so much fear of what was going to happen. And we ended up splitting up. I think I was about 29 or 30. And from then on, things just spiraled out of control. I had gone to stay with family. I had my kids with me. And there was so much support again. I talk about my family and my friends, really just amazing people. And none of them blamed me for the fallout of my marriage. They all supported me. They all just wanted to, help me in any way they could. And I think with that happening, I started to develop a sense of entitlement. I started to really feel like I deserved happiness, but I went about it the complete wrong way. I started using harder drugs. I started drinking all the time. I would jump from relationship to relationship to relationship. I started to neglect my children. I would leave my kids with my parents or their dad or wherever, and I would take off for days, and I would put myself in really, really dangerous situations. I had gone completely wild, and I still felt like I deserved this, happiness. I was allowed to be free because I had been pinned down for so long. And it was when my sister and my dad and a couple of other close friends really started to get on my case. They would say, "Amanda, whatever you're doing, you got to stop. Your kids need you." And in the meantime, my daughter, who was 7 when her dad and I split up, was really starting to go through a lot of emotion, a lot of trauma. She suffered a lot of trauma when her dad and I split up. And I didn't know how to handle that. So I left her. I left her to, in the hands of my parents, in the hands of her father, because I couldn't help her because I was busy taking care of myself. So really, really bad decisions, really selfish decisions that I was making. And when the people who had supported me at first were starting to call me out on my crap, I became angry and resentful, and it drove me even further away because I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear what they had to say. So fast forward a little bit, I met somebody who was sober, a few months sober, and he had kind of hinted at the idea that maybe, possibly, I might be an alcoholic and an addict, and he suggested a program of recovery. And so he had planted this little seed in my head because I knew that I needed to stop, but at this point, I couldn't stop. If I didn't drink, if I didn't use, it was physically painful for me. I couldn't sleep. I was full of fear. I had been fired from 2 jobs in a year. I had never been fired before in my life, and suddenly in a year, I'd been fired twice. I had lost a lot of friends. A lot of my family were just really disappointed in me, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll give it a try. But I wasn't quite ready yet. You know, the thought of being sober was really scary for me. I'm going to talk about the night I had my realization. I had concert tickets. My sister, myself, and a couple of friends were going to a concert. We had made arrangements where she was going to drive there and I was going to drive back. So naturally, I had grabbed a few drinks for the drive there. I had drank those really quickly. We had stopped off at my grandparents' house because it was on the way. And the first thing I did was go down to my grandfather's fridge and chug 4 beers before going back up to see everybody. We left there and I made everybody stop at the beer store so I could grab more. I drank those. We got into the concert and my sister had kind of given me a nudge and she said, hey, you know, I thought you said you were going to drive home. Like that was kind of our agreement. And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely, no problem. I'm just going to go to the bar to get you guys around. You know, I'm going to stop. And as I was standing in line at the bar, I was thinking to myself, how many shots could I take at the bar without them noticing? And that's where I had my realization. I was willing to put not only myself, but my sister, my friends, and everybody else in danger just so that I could continue drinking. And it was in that moment that I realized I've got to stop because it's going to kill me. And I went to the concert and my sister ended up driving us back. So, you know, again, it's just another broken promise. And I came home and I talked to my friend and I said, I'm ready. I'm ready to stop this madness. And that's when I made a date and I went into a church basement. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was sweating and I was shaking and I was again full of so much fear of what these people were going to think of me because I'm just such a lowlife. And I really thought nothing of myself. I thought nothing of myself at that point. And I was greeted with handshakes and hugs and understanding and no judgment whatsoever. And they let me talk, and I cried, and I begged for help. I mean, if there's anything about that first meeting that I remember, it is crying and just saying, please help me, just help me. And, you know, from then on, I kept going back. I kept going back and I kept going back. And I did steps and I got a sponsor. There were people that I talked to on a daily basis who always made me feel like they had my back. I listened to people tell their stories, and it didn't matter if it was a man or a woman, they were old or young, they were a doctor or a homemaker. I could relate to so many things that everybody was saying. We all had that one, common thing. And the more I went, the more I wanted to go. The more sober I was, the more sober I wanted to be. And I'm just so grateful that somebody planted that seed in my head. And if there's anything that I could say today to somebody who's struggling, it would be reach out and then take the help that somebody's offering. Because I know for me, there's so much inside of me, so much ego and so much pride and so much resentment that I didn't want to take any help that somebody was giving me. I wanted to do everything on my own. I felt like I needed to do everything on my own. And you don't ever have to do anything on your own. And today I'm so lucky. In recovery, I met somebody. I have 2 more kids. And it's like the little things and the big things. You know, my bills get paid, which, you know, it's such a nice feeling. And, you know, I'm content in the life that I have. I don't need or want more than what I've got today. But beyond that, you know, I'm a responsible employee. I'm a dependable friend. I'm honest. You know, I'm compassionate. I'm non-judgmental. All of these things that I've learned, you know, by working a program of recovery and the 12 steps, have really made me a better person. I really feel like they have. It's made me a better mom and a better wife, a better sister, a better daughter. And I'm so full of gratitude, you know, being grateful for things instead of always throwing myself a pity party or feeling sorry for myself. It's just a really great way to live. So, you know, I guess that's my story. Reach out if you're struggling. You know, you're not alone. You're not alone, and there are so many people who are not just willing to help you, but they want to help you. Because in my program, I can't keep what I have. I have to give it away. You know, so helping others, in a sense, helps me to stay sober. So yeah, reach out if you need it.